Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Dmitry Babayev, and I'm excited to dive into a topic that is pivotal to how businesses and employees manage their travel and expenses: the evolution of payments, navigating cash, cards, and virtual cards. Let's take a moment to consider how payments impact our daily lives. From small consumer transactions to large corporate purchases, it's not just about transferring money. It's a strategic component of every interaction with our customers, vendors, business partners, and our employees. And over the past decade, the landscape of payments has undergone significant change, reshaping business models and user expectations alike. The traditional payment methods of cash and cards have had to adapt to coexist with emerging technologies like virtual cards and contactless payment systems. But this evolution is not just driven by technology. With the increase of digital transactions and e-commerce, there has been just the heightened need and awareness around data privacy and security. And so one of the key drivers of change is the need for just better security and fraud prevention overall. Another key driver that's influencing this change is just the shift in user expectations. And so regardless, understanding the evolution of payments really is about understanding how the different payment modalities can help improve our user experience and help improve just overall business processes all around. So for today's session, what I'd like to do is examine some pros and cons of some of the most common payment methods available to our employees today. And then from there, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Jen Wightman, for a fireside chat to just dive even deeper into the topic. So with that, let's get started. And to set the stage, what I'd like to do is first discuss some of the key trends that we're seeing in the payments landscape. And specifically, what I'd like to reference is a study conducted by the Global Business Travel Association, GBTA. They recently released a report reflecting on a strong 2024 for business travel and setting an optimistic outlook for 2025. This study is based on a survey of around 900 industry professionals and highlighted some key trends. The first one being that 86% of respondents said that business travel met or exceeded expectations in 2024. And 67% responded saying that they see an optimistic outlook for 2025 and beyond. And one of the causes for optimism is easing travel costs, leading to more in-person meetings. And despite economic uncertainties, more than 50% said that they plan to maintain or exceed their travel budgets. In addition to that, more employees are engaging in blended work and leisure trips, or bleisure for short, kind of blurring the lines between where the work ends and the fun begins. And lastly, what the study highlighted is that with advancements in technology and artificial intelligence really being a priority for more than half of the travel programs. So what does this mean for travel managers and expense admins? Well, as the frequency and ways that our employees spend continue to increase and evolve, combined with the options for managing payments expanding, the question becomes, how do we choose the best payment method, best payment solution for our organization? And what you might find is that there isn't just one perfect solution, but it might be a hybrid approach to the various solutions that are available for you today. So let's dive into those. The first one that I want to touch on is cash. And when I say cash, I'm not just talking about paper money. It's also any personal form of payments that your employees might be using, as well as cash advances. And what cash provides to your employees is really the flexibility and the freedom to use their preferred method of payment. For the business side of things, it's a lot less administrative work that needs to be done. And in the case of cash advances, there's also potentially better budget controls. You advance a certain amount of money to your employee, you know exactly how much they're going to spend, and that's that. But while there are some benefits, I think there's really a lot of kind of negatives that we should talk about. The biggest one being is that using personal forms of payment ultimately can lead to a financial strain on your employees. Delayed reimbursements may really lead to just cash flow issues if those reimbursements are delayed to your employees. There's increased risk that comes with potential disputes where an employee might really disagree with what constitutes as a reimbursable business expense. There's also an administrative hassle for your employees, right? They don't get the automation that comes with corporate cards, and thus they have to then dedicate the time and effort to tracking all of their expenses, managing and keeping track of all of their receipts to submit all that and hopefully get reimbursed after their travel or their expenses are completed. And in the case of cash advances, although it may seem like you advance a certain amount of money and that's that, there's also a potential for mismanagement. Employees might misuse or mishandle those cash advances, leading to unbudgeted personal spending and an increased difficulty then managing overall business expenses. So this is where corporate cards really come into the picture and try to ease some of that pain. For one, corporate cards offer better controls over things like spending limit and policies. They provide better insights and reporting around the spend that's taking place, providing an easier way for organizations to track their employees' spend. It creates efficiency by streamlining expense management and reducing the administrative workload on employees. And also with those controls that I initially mentioned, it helps lead to greater adherence to corporate policies. The downside, though, is that there's, of course, management effort that needs to be considered for corporate card programs. And depending on how large your organization is and how widespread your business is around the world, it could take multiple card programs and multiple resources managing those programs globally. And not just that, but with corporate cards, you're typically limited to card level controls. And what I mean by this is that while you can set controls on certain merchants and certain vendors, it's typically done at the program level. So from an SAP perspective, if there's certain restrictions that are placed on, say, our CEO, Christian Klein's corporate card, well, I would be limited to those same restrictions, or those same restrictions that I have, he may be limited to as well. Then there's also the employee training that comes into play that needs to be considered, right? Educating your employees around proper usage of corporate cards, when to use and when to not use. And then the risk of misuse and fraud also needs to be weighed when considering a corporate card program. So then the last payment method that I want to touch on is virtual cards. And when I talk about virtual cards, I'm not just referencing a digital version of a plastic card that you might have in your mobile wallet. But really what I mean when I say a virtual card is a dynamically generated 16-digit credit card that can be generated on the fly. It can be either single use or multi-use, and typically comes with some sort of expiration date, maybe a day or a week, month out, generally is, I think, the most we will typically see. And what this creates is, for one, better control over the spend, and not just better control over the spend, but also better control over data privacy and transaction security. For instance, if I spend at a merchant with a plastic credit card and that merchant has a data breach, now that corporate credit card is potentially exposed to bad actors looking to do who knows what with that credit card. With a virtual card, though, that wouldn't be the issue, especially if that corporate card has already expired. Well, good luck with that 16-digit card number you just got, because it's effectively worthless. But with that, what virtual cards also bring is the same benefits that you'll see with plastic credit cards, right? It's the automation and the real-time tracking that you get, combined with the added security and ease of use that virtual cards provide. The downside of a virtual card you could consider is scalability. And if you asked me 10 years ago, I would say, yeah, that's probably the case, especially in the US, where things like tap to pay, mobile wallets were not very common here, as maybe in other parts of the world. But today, vendor acceptance of virtual cards is pretty widespread. And really the only downside that you might find, I think, with a virtual card is potential adoption barriers with employees who may be resistant to change or unfamiliar with how to use virtual cards. So let's now talk about how these different forms of payments are used around the world. This map here that I'm showing, it's very simple. I'm just kind of looking at it here from a regional perspective. So within each region, you'll find that it'll vary from country to country, but generally this is what we see to be true across our customers here at SAP Concur. The preferred method of payment and will vary from region to region, where mobile wallets are highly popular in places like Asia and in Africa, and corporate cards still dominate in North America and across Western Europe. So let's start with North America and Western Europe and dive into that a little bit more. Again, corporate cards are quite heavily utilized in those regions, just about anywhere you go. And cash advances are still typically less common outside of some regulatory requirements here and there that you might find. But mobile wallets are increasing in popularity quite substantially. Though they're not as prominent as we see in other parts of the world, they're certainly starting to trend up quite a bit. As we head down into Latin America, corporate card usage is definitely common in more developed economies like in Brazil and across Mexico, whereas cash advances are, we'll find common in areas with lower penetration of digital payment systems. And then mobile wallets are growing in popularity just like in North America, with platforms like Mercado Pago in Argentina and PicPay in Brazil. We're seeing that this is starting to gain in popularity quite a bit. So moving over to Africa, mobile wallets are quite widely used, especially in countries like Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. And these are often used for business transactions and consumer transactions alike due to their convenience and just wide reach. Cash advance also still quite common, and we see those in more developing countries, especially with ones with lack of infrastructure and limitation around their banking systems. And while corporate cards are less common, we do see them still being quite heavily used in developed economies like in the country of South Africa. Then moving over to the Middle East and Northern Africa, corporate cards are fairly common, especially in more developed economies like in the United Arab Emirates and in Saudi Arabia. And cash advances, just like in other parts of Africa as we see, are generally more prevalent in less developed economies and in less developed banking systems. And while mobile wallets aren't the most popular quite yet, we are seeing that they are starting to gain quite a bit of traction in that region. And last but not least, in Asia Pacific. Well, as you can see, I think all forms of payments are pretty common there, but mobile wallets are extremely popular, especially in countries like China with Alipay and WeChat, across India and across much of Southeast Asia as well. And these platforms are often used by employees and for corporate purchases as well. But nevertheless, corporate cards are still quite commonly used, even though mobile wallets are starting to dominate quite a bit. And finally, cash advances in Asia are probably the most common in less developed countries, just like we see in general in countries with less developed payment infrastructure. So with that in mind now, what I'd like to do is transition over and invite my friend and colleague here, Jen Wightman, for a chat about payments even more.
Awesome.
Jen, could you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Jen Wightman. I am a Director of Product Management at SAP Concur. I've been here about 11 years and doing payments the entire time, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about payments.
Thank you. Well, while there are certainly many different forms of payments that we can focus on today, what I would like to focus on for our conversation is specifically around corporate cards. And when it comes to corporate cards, and I know that with my personal card, I get alerts as soon as my card is swiped. And I think we're starting to see that come into corporate spend as well with real-time notifications. So can you just maybe describe a bit about what real-time notifications are and how they work?
Absolutely. Real-time notifications are honestly one of the things that's most exciting to me about corporate cards and the ability to really streamline the experience. So as we've seen on our personal card transactions for years now, that ability to get that instant information about your transaction. And when you're a consumer and you get a flag on a card that you rarely use, that's really useful information. Or if you're really trying to track all of the spend that's happening on your card, also super helpful. When it comes to an expense situation, though, you're interested in that initial swipe, but you're also really interested in what's the posted transaction. What information is going to actually go into that expense report, because that's the data that was fully, all the transactions are done. And historically, those two pieces of information don't really tie together. You might be buying gas and it's multiple, you get the one that says, yep, she use this card? And then how much did she spend on her gasoline? And so really trying to connect the dots to make sure that that swipe information connects to the expense reportable data when it's posted is what's kind of new. And so what we're doing is looking at how to take that information, combine it together, and really make RTN work for employees as well as employers. So by taking this data, we're able to provide employee information that says you have just spent money and you need to do something with it. We can take that information and put it as a placeholder on their expense report. We can ensure that that data is being used to its utmost value, both to make the employee's life easier when it comes to creating the expense report and making the corporation's life easier by actually just putting more card spend on a corporate card. Concur is looking at launching this functionality initially with just charges for meals. What we find is that meals is probably the most commonly charged item that goes through an expense report. Everybody needs to eat, whether or not you're traveling and you just have that late night meal because you've been busy all day, or even you're just at the office and you need to have a working lunch. There's all sorts of reasons that folks need to charge meals. And so what we're going to do is launch the ability to have corporate cards have the ability to take that meal transaction information and throw it initially onto an expense report, as well as provide information to employees so that yep, this is both going on my expense report and maybe a reminder about what I need to do with that card spend. And so that's something we want to start with. It'll be an initial list of issuers, mostly the issuers that we can ensure that the data matches correctly as we go through it. We want to expand this as we go along and also expand different kinds of payments. But we know that there's a lot of information that can be gathered, and what we want to do is work with our clients to ensure that as we grow this out, we're using the right areas of information as well as getting that data through correctly.
Well, that sounds awesome. I can't even count how many times I've gone out for a meal. Had maybe clients attend with me, and the card charge wouldn't post to my expense report for like 2-3 days until after the transaction settled. Yeah. And then I have to remember, okay, did I get the receipt? Who were all the attendees that were there? But it sounds like now I'll be able to get a notification right away letting me know, hey, yep, like this meal exceeds a certain limit, capture the attendees, grab the receipt, and get all that done right away instead of waiting for some days to pass until I remember to do that.
Absolutely.
So with such a powerful tool like real-time notifications, it seems like companies would be really interested in getting corporate cards in the hands of more employees. Okay. But I know that I've talked to many clients who intentionally don't provide corporate cards for many of their employees, whether it's for security reasons or other concerns that they might run into. I guess the question that I have is, what options exist to help companies just feel more comfortable with getting more corporate cards in the hands of more employees?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's obviously feedback that I've been getting from clients as well over time. I think what's really interesting is that the concept of corporate cards, while it can be so valuable from a corporate level, has that balancing act of fear, especially when you're dealing with employees that don't spend all that often. Maybe you've got all of your traveling sales folks using a corporate card because they're spending all the time, but everybody else, you're going to ask them to use their personal cards. You're not capturing that spend, and your employees don't have the ability for the automation that we talked about. So one of the things that we're doing is we're allowing clients to have control over those plastic cards at a more refined level than just one per program, or requiring someone to go into an issuer's website and set those on a specific card level. What we're doing is we're calling this new functionality dynamic card management. And at the end of the day, dynamic card management is intended to allow our clients to have the better confidence in their corporate card program and feel like they can have more employees with a plastic card. It kind of gives some of the controls that we talked about on virtual cards on a plastic card. The idea is that within the Concur application, the administrator will be able to select a group of employees and enroll them in the card controls aspect of dynamic card management. These employees will be able to get an alert that says your plastic card is now under management and it's frozen. You can't use it until you request that it be unfrozen. And this works great, especially for employees that spend once or twice a year. If the only thing I'm spending on my corporate card is a trip to Fusion annually, I probably don't want to have that corporate card. I don't want to have it open and available for fraud or misuse or me losing it. If it's frozen, everyone is happy, the employee and my company. But it's great to be able to use that card when I need to. I don't want to have to front the cost of the hotel or everything else that has to go into Fusion. I can still use my corporate card. I don't have to worry about those funds. And it all works really well. And then when the card is frozen at the end of the day, I don't have to worry about what happens when I accidentally try to use it because I can't. I know that I'm going to come home from Fusion and I'm going to have an emergency run to the grocery store. My small child is going to make that a crazy event, and I'm just going to tap my phone and try to get out of there as quick as I can. And it's going to decline because the top of my wallet is my corporate card. And it's frozen because I'm no longer on my trip. I'm not using it anymore. So I'll have to switch out to my personal card, and everyone's saved. I didn't make a corporate card purchase or a personal purchase on my corporate card. My company doesn't have to deal with that. Everyone's happy, and it just works out really well.
That's great. So I guess before we wrap up today, I do want to just touch on virtual cards a bit more. I guess at the end of the day, it's true that not every single employee will need a plastic corporate card. Especially with tap to pay gaining traction and just e-commerce being just so common in today's world. I know that over the last decade or more, I've been reading about how virtual cards are the future. They're going to take over. And while they're certainly a piece of the puzzle, I feel like they haven't taken over quite to the level that's been expected. So what are folks missing about the benefit of virtual cards?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I've been there as well. It's been kind of fascinating to watch the growth of virtual cards over time and kind of how it stumbles through. There was a lot of concern, especially even just a couple years ago, about the accessibility of those virtual cards. And anyone can use a virtual card for e-commerce purchase. Anyone, you're either reading the card off of the plastic in your hand or you're reading it off of your phone because you've gotten an email with that virtual card number in it. So e-commerce has never really been the problem, and e-commerce has often been really the place for virtual card spend. But especially with the pandemic and lots of places really upping their game when it comes to the ability to do digital transactions, we find that corporate card spend can really easily be put into a virtual card. At the end of the day, virtual cards are really important because in many cases it's so difficult to manage plastic. Our ability to manage plastic in DCM is going to expand that. So it will really kind of fill out the edges of that experience. Our intention is with a lot of things we do just to provide options. We want our clients to be able to card their employees in the way that really gets the most possible employee spend on those cards, whether it's plastic or virtual. Honestly, we don't care, and we don't think our clients really do either. They just want to make sure that they have the vehicles necessary to get their employees using corporate spend. So virtual cards can be that. But what's the other challenge that our clients tell us about? It's the management of virtual cards. Generally, when we talk to clients, there's this crazy process of putting in a request that goes to another department that has to be approved, and someone has to log into the website of the issuing bank, create the card, get it to the employee. And they might not even know what the card is for, so there's not a lot of visibility into that. And so what we've done is we've said, okay, this is all happening within the scope of expense. You're probably not giving someone a corporate card and letting them charge on it without needing to go through the expense process anyways. So what if we take it out of the hands of a few small teams working on the actual relationship with the bank and push it down to the employees who know that they need to spend, and that's just the policy. So the admins will still have control. The admins will still determine which employees get paid. It's not going to be that suddenly Manager Jen can hand out a virtual card to you and you and you and you. There's still a structure at the admin level that says these are the employees who can receive virtual cards from which sources, under which circumstances. And that's great. But the actual generation of those cards happens automatically. The employee just needs to go into Concur, request to spend. They'll say how much they need, the time frame that they're going to be using the card for, the reason that they're doing the spend, and then they'll be able to request that from their manager, the person who's going to be approving their expense report anyways at the end of the day. That employee who's designated to get a virtual card will then get a virtual card. They'll be able to spend just as easily as the employee who had their card unfrozen was able to spend, and within the same parameters. Once that virtual card time window is done, the card doesn't work anymore. If I've put that in my corporate, in my phone, in my wallet to tap to pay, it'll also not work the same way that my plastic card won't. And at the end of the day, this gives that flexibility. Virtual cards can be generated and used on the go, and giving the employees the ability to spend regardless of how it of the method, and giving the admins the ability for that visibility into how that spend works. The idea with DCM is to kind of start at a really basic level and then grow from there. So the initial launch of our DCM solution is going to be for a really simple on-off of plastic cards and a simple request of the virtual card for purposes of spend. But we see so much promise in the ability to continue to expand this for clients. One of the really interesting things that we hear from clients is the fact that airline travel can be so expensive, and especially when we're talking about the burden you put on an employee, the cost of that airline can really destroy their own personal corporate card or their personal card. And so being able to have maybe a virtual card just for all air travel, that's your corporate policy. If you need to do air travel, request a virtual card, and that comes from a source that's dedicated for that purpose, so that the employee can still use the rest of their spend in their targeted space. Or potentially we want the ability to manage the ability to set those levels up and down. There's so many different opportunities that we see as growing this out, and we're really excited to work with our clients and find out what's going to be most beneficial for them and what's going to help keep that value to the employees as well as the value to the company to raise all boats when it comes to corporate spend.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you all for joining us here today. We hope that you found this session insightful and informative. And I would just like to leave you all with a parting thought. As I mentioned at the start of this session, there might not be just one single form of payment that's going to be the perfect solution for your organization. It might take a hybrid approach to finding what's going to work well at your business. And so if you haven't already joined, I would like to invite you all to come and join the SAP Concur community. It's a great place to share ideas and learn from peers who may have already gone through or are going through whatever change you and your organization might be going through today. So again, thank you all for your time, and take care.